It's Wednesday, November 26th, and we just got done with back-to-back-to-back days of severe weather down here in the southern US. And this system is about to make its final blow today, although it's going to be quite a bit weaker. Only expected to be some thunderstorms, and a lot of these are actually going to be kind of moved all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean before lunch today. The only area which is going to be a little more prolonged is going to be up here in the Northeast. But once again, no severe weather, potentially some strong gust and thunderstorms in these green shaded areas, but that's pretty much going to be it. And we're going to move from the bottom to the top of the US today. It looks like actually overnight is when this line associated with this cold front is going to be at its strongest, pushing through parts of middle Georgia and then central the Carolinas as well. Actually, in the very, very early morning hours, so before even daybreak comes, probably still producing some thunderstorms, although it looks like the convergence at our line is going to really let up as the sun kind of starts to rise. And this is a fairly stable environment in front of these storms. So it looks like the storms might actually be done a little bit before lunchtime today, before that front pushes off into the Atlantic. Now, really the only area which looks like it could see storms all the way past into maybe the early afternoon looks like down here in the far, far southeastern corner of Georgia, and then maybe moving through northern Florida and then central Florida also. But once again, we're going to see the same thing. These storms are expected to dissipate before the mid-afternoon. We can see that there's just really not that much convergence here on our cold front, and this is a pretty stable environment in front of these storms. So it looks like they're going to kind of dissipate, and you might actually not really see anymore, except for maybe a couple of blips down here in far, far southeastern Florida, kind of like the Fort Lauderdale, Miami-Dade region. Now, moving up to the mid-Atlantic, we're going to see a lot of the same thing with this line. Very, very early morning hours today. Lots of rain still before this front is going to be pretty much pushed all the way off into the Atlantic by daybreak, and then it's going to be pretty much done. Maybe with the storms before daybreak, we could get some strong gusts, but that looks like that's going to be pretty much it. And then maybe we get a couple of blips kind of redeveloping along a secondary cold front, which we can also kind of see draped down here. Then also there's going to be an area of increased forcing right here from our jet stream. So maybe a couple more stronger blips around the early afternoon in parts of North Carolina and then southern Virginia, specifically southeastern Virginia, but that looks like it's going to be pretty much it for the mid-Atlantic region. Now, moving up to our final area of concern, Northeast, immediately it looks quite a bit more active up here, way more storm coverage, way more precipitation. First things first, we're going to see kind of this first really massive blip of some light precip move through in the very, very early morning hours today. A couple of blips in front of that. And then we're going to see here is going to be a low pressure system right here. And then we're going to have a couple of fronts moving across Lake Ontario into parts of western New York. This looks like this is going to be the area receiving the strongest storms today. And that's going to be because we're just going to have more shear up here, because this is going to be pretty much right next to our low pressure system. And then it looks like we could have some greater flow and convergence on our cold front. Just all in all, a better storm environment. So maybe some strong gust with those. Nothing really is expected to be severe with this. And these thunderstorms could actually reach all the way down into central New Jersey. So also be on the lookout for that. Now, this is the jet stream, which is kind of causing all of our weather, and immediately it becomes way, way more evident why we're seeing way more storm coverage up here in parts of the Northeast and not really down here in parts of the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic, except for this one exception, this one little prefrontal trough, which could bring a couple of those blips that we just talked about in potentially the early to mid-afternoon hours. But it looks like our jet is going to have a pretty strong ejection, of course, with that central low pressure system over parts of Michigan throughout the day. And this is going to bring some really solid organizational shear and just overall better storm ingredients enforcing for our storms up there in the Northeast. That is why there is so much storm coverage up there. And for the areas that we didn't directly recover or cover, which is pretty much going to be not everything that's over here in the east, it looks like we're going to have quite a bit of precipitation associated with that central low pressure system as it pushes eastward today. So definitely a lot of precip over Wisconsin and Michigan. Now, a lot of that is expected to be snow, which is definitely going to be something to look at. And it's not just going to be snow, it's going to be loads of snow, potentially up to 20 inches in some areas. Same thing over here for the Northeast, except not really the same thing. There is going to be snow, except it's likely to just be a couple of flurries, maybe reaching up to 2 inches at the max. And then unsurprisingly, up here in the Northern Rockies and Pacific Northwest, once again, more precipitation today, and that is going to bring snow in the higher elevations. Now let's actually look at our snow totals, and it is going to be quite a bit in the areas that I just mentioned. The main hot spots are going to be all the way from the far, far south and northern corners of the Dakotas. Central Minnesota looks like it's going to really get covered almost by a ton of snow. And then northern Wisconsin and the Michigan Peninsula, and even the western Michigan coast looks like it could get loads of snow today. It looks like this snow is going to fall kind of moving from west to east. So in the earlier hours of the day, look to see all of this stuff. And then as we go into nightfall, that's probably when the snow is going to start coming down in parts of Michigan. Now, the snow probably won't reach the Northeast or New York until nightfall. And it looks like it could just be a couple of flurries near the Great Lake, maybe aided by a little bit of the lake effect, although there's not really much there to be had. And then, of course, in the Northern Rockies, and then actually the Northern Cascades looks like they could get a pretty good bit of snow, maybe even up to double digits. But in the Northern Rockies today, look to see local maximums of 5 inches in the higher elevations. Now, one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of this snowfall up north is because we're actually going to see a really cold air mass start to move in. This is going to be brought by that cold front that's moving west to east across the U.S. today. And actually, these are going to be some pretty solid temperatures for us pretty much everywhere that is not the far, far west coast, excluding the Pacific Northwest, and the far, far east coast and the far, far southeast coast, that is specifically going to be Florida, is going to likely be sitting in some high to low 50s, feels like temperatures. And then pretty much the central US is going to be experiencing some low 40s to maybe even high 30s, feels like temperatures. Then, of course, if you're up in the far, far north, which is going to be that area, it's going to receive all that snow that we just talked about. You're going to be seeing some freezing, feels like temperatures. Of course, as we go into the night, this is only going to dip further with maybe some low 40s, feels like temperatures dipping as far south as the Florida Panhandle. Fortunately, if you are in Central Florida, it's still probably not going to break below a 65 heat index. And of course, we can just see this cool air mass really starting to dig in, maybe single digits in parts of the Dakotas. And this trend is only going to keep going. This is probably about a week in the future, and we can start to see some pretty prevalent negatives, which are just going to sit up here in the Dakotas and northern Montana. So that's what's going to look like in the future. Expect to see quite a bit more cold for really the rest of the year.